Welcome to EastFlank podcast, part of the Eastern Flank EU reporting project, in which we work together with journalists from across the region to present the European Union affairs from the perspective of the EU's and NATO Eastern Flank. Today we will focus on an always timely topic, energy. This episode is based on our latest collaborative report on energy systems in the shadow of Russia's war against Ukraine. The link to this report is in the podcast description. I'm Olga Jurkowska from Euroactive Poland, and I'm joined today by Aneta Zachowa from Euroactive Czechia and Zuzana Gabrizowa from Euroactive Slovakia. Hello. And as a warm up, let's look into the latest news on energy from our Eastern Flank region. Let me start with a few words about Poland because the European Commission has approved public support. It is over 14 billion euros for Poland's first nuclear power plant. We are starting the construction after really many years of preparation, and this is the largest energy investment in Polish history. And now the biggest challenges will be to keep to the schedule and stay within the budget, which, looking at the similar projects in Finland and France, is not an easy task. This is also important because it means that the Polish government has finally started taking concrete action to find a stable alternatives to coal in the longer perspective. And this is what's going on in Poland. And how about Slovakia, Zuzana?
Right. Also, what you're mentioning proves that there is a nuclear renaissance going on in our countries, because our biggest news of the last day, well, actually just 2 days ago, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico signed an intergovernmental agreement with U.S. Secretary of Energy. And this agreement is to advance cooperation on Slovakia's civil nuclear power program. So it basically should cover the preparation of a concrete investment, which should be a new state-of nuclear unit with installed capacity of 1,200 megawatts at the premise of Jaslovské Bohunice, which already hosts a nuclear power plant. And its estimated worth at this time is 15 billion euro, so much more than in Czech Republic. And it's supposed to be undertaken by, of course, American company
Wow.
Westinghouse. And there is a lot of discussion surrounding that, because the government opted not for a public procurement, but direct. They went directly to the Americans after some consultation with the Koreans and the French. So this is a big news, because of course in the times of consolidation, Slovakia does not have 15 billion euros. So there is they already hired a company that should look into how it should be basically financed.
Wow. That's very interesting. A very big investment. And how
Yeah.
about Czechia, Aneta?
Yeah, like regarding nuclear project, it's interesting that we did a different approach than Poland and Slovakia. We have this like public procurement, and actually the Czech government says that it's not good to have these bilateral agreements with the US or other countries who are, able to provide new reactors. So fingers crossed for Poland and Slovakia and Czech Republic as well with these projects. Anyway, now we have intense debate about coal phase out. We are sure that it will happen in next decade, but big guys operating coal power plants in the Czech Republic, namely Pavel Tykač from Seven Company, are now saying that coal is no longer profitable and they want to shut down coal plants earlier. And of course, they want some subsidies from state. But actually, there are new studies coming saying that we actually do not these plants anymore, and that we should not, grant these plants more subsidies than we are doing right now. So there is interesting discussion about it. And as you know, Czech Republic has a new government from December, and the new government wants to fully buy the energy giant of the Czech Republic. It means chess company. Now chess is owned partly by state and partly by minority shareholders. and now the state wants to have a fully control over chess. So it will be one of the main topics in energy for this year, because we don't know the details yet, but it will be a big change for the Czech energy to have this like fully nationalized company operating in the market.
This is very interesting. Regarding the phasing out coal, we have very similar discussion in Poland. I will talk about it maybe later. And now moving to our another topic, it's energy mixes and the findings of our report. So how the energy mix has changed over the past decade in Poland, Czechia, and Slovakia. And let me present some data. Regarding Poland, Poland is limiting the role of fossil fuels over the last decade for by 30%. So this is quite a lot. And we are expanding renewables. And in June 2025, renewable energy sources produced for the first time in history more electricity than coal. So this is quite interesting. But coal obviously still plays a major role in stabilizing the energy system in Poland. And as for Czechia, Czechia is also reducing fossil fuels and keeping nuclear energy at a stable base at the same time. But what we see is the growing use of solar energy. And coal, as you mentioned before, Aneta, is still there's a still significant share of coal in the production mix. So this is a similar situation to Poland. And in case of Slovakia, the situation is slightly different because the energy mix did not change much. And it looks very, very good on paper because there are two main sources that are dispatchable. I mean, nuclear energy and renewables, hydropower. So probably, Zuzana, in Slovakia, you do not pay high emission costs, and the energy can be cheap. At least that's how it looks on paper. But how is it in reality, Zuzana?
Yeah, the energy definitely isn't cheap, but it's true that what happened over the last decade, there was almost complete decarbonization of electricity generation, which is kind of a big deal. The coal, in our case, has been phased out, and its proportion at the electricity consumption has dropped from like 14% to 2%. So yeah, the portion or the share of the nuclear energy in Slovakia, when it comes to the overall energy mix, but also in electricity specifically, is very high. It's about 60%, and only France has a slightly higher share of nuclear. So yeah, that was our biggest policy option, and it still is. Obviously. But what remained relatively unchanged is that in heat and transport, they remained largely dependent on fossil fuels. So yeah, that especially in heat production, for households, the gas is still quite dominant. And yeah, and as far as the dependence on Russian fossil fuels, we will talk about it later. But it's been a known issue, but it has only been tackled in the last year, and not from our own will.
Yeah, yeah. And how about Czechia, Aneta?
Like in past years, we could see definitely some kind of improvement, less fossil fuels, at the same time, at least some kind of improvement when it comes to solar energy. But I have to say, and many Czech analysts and experts says that the change was very slow and not sufficient. That we had opportunities to really change our energy mix, to invest in renewables, but we didn't really use this opportunity well. Like most of the changes occurred only in past 2-3 years after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But as Zuzka said, we will discuss about it later. But we still face many problems, for example, when it comes to wind energy. Like, let's say, the deployment of new wind turbines is super low. We are still facing a big NIMBY effect. People are not, ready to accept wind turbines near their villages, and there are many referendums ongoing, and people are often voting against the new wind farms or wind energy farms near their household. So there is still a big problem. And the last government, they tried to do something. They tried to communicate better about the need to change the energy mix, but as I said, it wasn't enough, and with the new government we can't expect any big changes in the future.
Right. If I may, I failed to mention renewables earlier. Well, Slovakia's geography favors like hydropower, which is our biggest forms the biggest part or biggest share on the renewables, because we have rivers, and that's kind of favor that. But it very much what Aneta said about the situation with the other renewables. It's very difficult, and it's even becoming a hot political issue. It's a topic. New wind and solar plants, especially the wind plants, it comes with very high cost in terms of, well, financially, of course, but there are many problems when discussing these projects on the municipalities levels. There's many misinformations, there are many hoax that are flying around, and also our current government is very much not in favor of these projects, so there is not much going on in terms of wind and solar here.
Yeah, in Poland we have a little bit different situation because if we look at the bigger picture, it seems that Poland has has done quite a good job diversifying the energy sources, especially when we are talking about renewables. But these numbers on the growth of share of renewables in energy mix are misleading because it's not really the government that did most of it, but the people. Because in case of Poland, it is most solar energy, and these are solar panels that are installed by the citizens, not the government. So this is the first point I would like to mention about Poland. And the second thing that unlike Slovakia, as you said about the hydropower, unlike Slovakia, in Poland, renewables are weather dependent because, as I mentioned, it is mostly solar and also to some extent wind energy. So they are more challenging to manage for the system. So this is a quite complicated issue. And the third point is similar to what you said, Aneta, that whether it was a seized or missed opportunity this last decade, when it comes to the investments in green transition, the money that was supposed to go into this from the ETS, so from the emissions trading in Poland, was spent on other things. So it was not invested in the transition, but simply eaten up. So when we look at the mix, yes, there have been changes in the energy mix, and the share of coal is going down on the paper, and in reality, to a certain extent too. But this is mostly thanks to the people and not the government. And that's, I think, that's something that I wanted to emphasize. And having said that, I think we can move to our next topic, energy crisis 2022. And obviously, we all remember February 2022 and the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think we also remember April 2022 when Gazprom halted supplies to Poland and Bulgaria. And this was the beginning of the escalation that affected also other countries, namely Czech Republic and Slovakia. And my question is, what helped your country avoid the worst disruptions? And did the crisis validate earlier strategies or not? And Zuzana, was Slovakia prepared for the crisis thanks to earlier strategies? Because when you look at the energy mix, it may seem so. But my question is, what was it like in reality? Was your country prepared for what happened?
Well, Slovakia certainly did not escape the crisis completely, but like the nuclear energy, gas storage, and EU cooperation, of course, like helped to prevent any major blackouts or energy collapse. So yeah, so nuclear is something that helped to be stable in a way. And of course, there was some gas storage done in advance, which helped to cover the short-term shortages when Russian supplies became uncertain. And yeah, and of course, there were already some diversified gas routes, and even though Slovakia was dependent on Russian gas and is to a certain extent still, it could get the gas through other routes, so we are neighboring countries, so not only directly from Russia. Yeah, but the EU cooperation, I would say, that definitely played a role not only for us, but I think regionally it's an important factor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. And how about Czechia, Aneta? How was it in Czech Republic?
Yes, so for us, I think it was important that we buy LNG terminal shares in Netherlands and in Germany. So we had this like second option, I would say. Before we were similarly as Germany, pretty much dependent and expecting that in next decades we will rely on cheap Russian gas, but this dream suddenly ended, and we had to, you know, adapt and to have these like shares in LNG terminals in the West. It really changed a lot of things. It gave us some kind of security that we will have enough supplies during the winters. So that was very important. It was true that Czechia was also very vulnerable after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and I remember that in 2022, in the second half of the year, Czechia was holding the rotating presidency in Council of the EU. And I remember I was traveling with our then industry minister, Josef Sikela, who's currently a European commissioner, to Brussels, to all these meetings about how to solve the energy crisis, how to secure enough gas flows across the EU. And I know that for the Czech Republic, it was really important to have these like solidarity mechanisms that, you know, states will help each other in case of some major disruptions. But luckily, at the end, it was not so bad, but the mechanisms were approved, and the gas was flowing through all winters, and we made enough, you know, capacities. We built new infrastructure. It's not only about gas but also about oil. We connected with the TAL oil pipeline. We made some improvements, and it really helped us to survive. And of course, as Susanna said, also for us, the nuclear energy was very important. That we had this like secure, stable source of electricity in the Czech Republic. It was quite weird that the Czech government was saying that thanks to nuclear energy and thanks to new nuclear reactors that are coming in next decade, we will be safe. But we were afraid of this gap that could appear in 2025, 2026, because we are still missing the new nuclear plants. We have only the old ones. So we were afraid that we won't have enough electricity, for example. But for now, it seems that we are okay, and thanks to also support from other countries that we can import electricity and gas, everything went well.
Yeah, it is interesting because you say about nuclear energy that the nuclear energy provided the stability. In Poland, we still do not have a nuclear power plant, but I have to admit that Poland was really prepared for this crisis, and it showed us that we were right about Russia all the time. That we did a good job diversifying the sources and the routes of supply, and so when the supplies were cut in 2022, Poland actually could manage. And I think that this is, to a certain extent, a success story because the policy that was in Poland about the lack of trust in Russia was elevated to the European level. So this was important. And I have to also say that we had different governments in Poland, often in conflict with each other, making contradictory decisions, but on this one single issue, meaning Russia and the threat it poses to Eastern Flank and to energy. These governments share a common stance. So this was not something that you could take for granted in Poland because normally our governments are always in conflict and there is no policy of continuity. But in case of energy, there was this continuity. So all these investments like LNG terminal in Świnoujście, the Baltic Pipe, these investments were maintained. And that is why actually Poland was among the first countries that was able to stop using Russian gas in 2022. As far as I remember, Lithuania, I think, was the first country, but we are also among the first countries that was able to stop using Russian gas. And I think this is a positive aspect of this very difficult story. And now we can move to less positive aspect because to energy prices that were one of the very sensitive issues during the crisis and the bills we all had to pay. So let me say a few words about the attitude of the citizens to the high energy prices because I have data from a November 2022 flash Eurobarometer, and that's the data shows that 85% of EU citizens said that rising energy prices in 2022 hurt their buying power. And I have also data for Czechia. This is a different survey, but also from 2022. And this shows that the increase in energy prices affected almost half of the Czechia citizens. And when it comes to Slovaks, it is 44% of the respondents that say that they were affected by high energy prices, and 40% of Poles. And what is obvious, energy prices affect the prices of everything else. So I would like to ask you, how did your government respond to this pressure over the energy bills? Because Aneta, when it comes to Czechia, I've checked that in Czechia, in the first half of 2022, electricity prices for households went up by over 60%. And my question is, was this a very sensitive political issue in Czechia?
Yeah, it was one of the main issues, I would say, because we were also in times kind of like pre-election. We had elections last year, and these like echoes of this like energy price crisis were was still ongoing even last year. It was really difficult for Czech citizens, and of course then opposition, now the government, they were using this in the campaign a lot, and they were blaming the government that they did not enough to help people to cover the costs. There were huge discussions regarding the regulated price of energy, for example, or regarding the price caps on energies in the Czech Republic. Government, which was then the time, was criticized that they did some only small changes, really temporary price caps that were not enough to really help the Czech households, and they that should actually do more to save especially the vulnerable part of Czech societies. And it was then like used, as I said, in the campaign. And now the new government, one of their first moves they did was actually announcement that they will reduce again the regulated part of electricity by 15%, which is kind of a big change, and that all the households will save around 400 crowns per megawatt hour on electricity every month. So they are now really trying to promise Czech citizens that their energy bills will be much lower than they were during the rule of the previous government. And with this, let's say, big change, of course, that the prices will get lower a bit. But again, what experts and analysts are warning against is that it will be only a temporary measure. Still, we will have this kind of debt, and that we will have to, or the households will have to pay this money back, but they will not do it this year or next year, but after 10 years or something like that. So the discussion is still very lively, despite that we saw the main price hikes in 2022 and 2023. Even now in 2026 is one of the most highlighted political issues we are discussing in the Czech Republic.
Yeah, it is a very similar situation in Poland. And Zuzana, how is it in Slovakia? Because looking at the energy mix, I would assume that the energy itself is quite cheap in Slovakia. So, how are the bills?
It hasn't been really the case because, well, after 2022, there of course came like price increases, especially when it comes to heating. So it hit the households and of course the industry quite hard. So even the electricity prices, of course, went up. So it would have been an issue for any government, and it is. So the governmental intervention started as early as 2022, and it was a mixture of subsidies and later price caps. And during the next years, these freezes and support continued and became a new normal basically. And from 2022 until the half of 2025, the state basically spent on this, subsidizing energy, electricity, gas, heating, more than 4 billion euro. And and this is something that is continuing, especially this year when the government is trying to make the support or the subsidies more targeted, according to needs of the household. And the system was presented at the end of the last year, and it of course came with big discussion, big criticism, because when you do such a system, necessarily it's not an easy task. And there are of course instances where some people who have about average income would be entitled to this support, and on the other hand, people with under average income weren't entitled. So there will be some fixes needed, but they can be done earliest in the second half of 2026. Well, this year. And what was also kind of interesting in the debate and to cover as journalists, that the government actually tried to cover the bill for the energy subsidies via the European funds. And even the Prime Minister and the Minister of Economy were communicated. It's been negotiated with the European Commission. We will do that. It's a done deal. It's something more than 400 million euro. But then, like 2 weeks passed, and the European Commission said in a very not uncertain terms that no, this cannot be done with the EU funds. You just cannot, use the European money for compensating the energy prices. And so what they did and what they communicated is okay. So they negotiated the EU money going to a construction of a new military hospital, and said that since they were able to save the money there, this is the money that they will use to subsidize the energy prices. So yeah, it's definitely a hot topic here as well.
This is very interesting, and yes, a similar situation in Poland because obviously Poland used similar consumer protection measures as Czechia and Slovakia, so price cap subsidies. But I would like to say a few words about prices from a different angle because in Poland, obviously we are still struggling with high energy prices, but the reasons for this are different because 2022 crisis, the reason for high costs of high bills were high costs of energy itself, and now the problem is different because we are now struggling with high costs of energy due to system costs. So we have expanded the renewables, and these renewables are not dispatchable, so they are weather dependent. So what we have to invest in are grid modernizations and ensuring the system balancing or capacity mechanisms, and these are the costs that we also see on the bills. And most of people in Poland, they do not understand it, and they are arguing why we still have to pay so high energy bills when at the same time the growth of renewables in the energy mix is still the share of renewables in the energy mix is still growing and growing. And this is a political issue here because the people don't understand what is going on, and they expected the energy bills to be lower, and they are not. So the problem is that the renewables, especially the ones that are dependent on the weather, are not do not mean automatically a lower energy bills, and I wanted to mention it here. Moving on to another topic of our discussion, also related to 2022 crisis, is what really changed in the political thinking and in terms of energy policies, but also challenges, or maybe everything stayed the same. So Zuzana, how does it look from Slovakia's perspective?
Well, in this constellation of countries that we do have here in this podcast, it may be specific. I mean, in terms that when the pressure intensified from the European Union, European Commission to really do something with the dependence on Russian fossil fuels, and when it started to be clear that this phase out of Russian gas imports will be terminating, the state-owned gas company already started to adapt, looking for different routes, looking to access of LNG. But in the political narrative, there was a strong pushback, and still is a very strong pushback against it. They're calling this policy of phasing out Russian fossil fuels to be ideological, that it's going to be economic suicide for Slovakia and also for the EU as a whole. So there was and still is a big pushback, and Slovakia even threatened to veto 2 packages of Russian sanctions over it. But behind the scenes, of course, the country has prepared for that and looking for different routes and different suppliers. And what it meant for Slovakia also was that it lost hundreds of millions of euros on transit fees when Ukraine stopped the transit of Russian gas. Slovakia is still getting Russian gas, but not via Ukraine, but via southern corridors, via Hungary. So yeah, there was this kind of schizophreny.
Yeah, and how about Czech's perspective?
Yes, so I think that Czech Republic, the Czech state, because of this crisis, become much more, let's say, willing to invest in energy and to be more, let's say, active player when it comes to securing gas, electricity, and so on. Like before, it was not really a topic, it was not really driving political agenda, but now we can see that even the previous government and the current one are much more readier to intervene. As I already spoke about it, about these like price reliefs, that the state is willing to really make electricity bills lower and to take some costs and to pay for the people. But when it comes to ownership moves of chess, you can really see that the state is much more ready to be an active player when it comes to energy supplies and electricity generation. Also, like this discussion about dependence on Russian or fossil fuel supplies, I think we have some kind of basic political consensus that it is good to diversify, and it is good to look for alternative sources, and that it's good to have cheap sources, but the price shouldn't be still the number one factor when we are deciding about the sources of energy, but that we should really look for this diversification and to have more options where to go in case of some disruptions. So that was also kind of change in narrative when it comes to the Czech public debate about the energy.
Yeah, but this is very positive information considering the change in Czech government. So nice to hear this.
Yeah, it's good that the state is active, but sometimes what some politicians are saying, I wouldn't consider it really positive, because sometimes they're offering more kind of like populistic, solutions. So we have to still be, a bit cautious when it comes to this like state activities in the field of energy, because still the energy market is liberalized. It's about the free market, and state interventions sometimes could a bit jeopardize this energy market system.
Yeah, that's true. I more meant diversification of the supplies.
Yes, at least in when it comes to diversification, it's definitely a positive change. And what's also interesting and important is that now we have also a discussion about grids, for example. Also, that's a topic that was very niche, very minor in discussions before. And now grid stability and grid modernization is a big topic. Of course, it's a topic for the whole European Union, but in Czech Republic, it is even more discussed because we faced quite a big blackout last year. It was connected with some technical issue, but also when it comes to the lack of modernization of some networks. So now the government is also much more willing to invest in modernization and to use EU tools, public funding, but also some loans, some modern way how to finance investments in infrastructure. So that's also kind of like positive change in Czech narratives about the energy security.
Yeah, good to hear that. When it comes to political thinking in Poland, I think that diversification and this lack of trust in Russia, this was our approach earlier, and this aspect remained the same. But what is important, as I mentioned before, it was elevated to the regional level and even to the entire EU level, which I think can be seen as a certain success of the whole region in this difficult situation of the war in Ukraine. And when it comes to challenges, we have still the same obvious challenges. So the issue of moving away from coal, which has been on Polish leaders' minds more or less strongly for like over decades. And this is this age-old question of what could replace coal. And finally, as I mentioned before, the nuclear power is returning to the game. But this is obviously a longer perspective, 10 or even more years. And in short terms, what has changed in political thinking is that they finally decided that what should be used before the construction of nuclear plant is completed, what should fill in this gas. So probably Poland will increase the share of gas in the energy mix, and obviously the gas will be imported through the terminal in Świnoujście, Baltic pipe, and the floating terminal in Gdańsk. And what is, I think, important is that the crisis, 2022 crisis, also increased this, I think, thinking of the importance of regional cooperation, although we've been also talking about it before. But when it comes to Poland, it triggered this idea of Poland as an energy hub for Europe, specifically a gas hub for Europe, because of this multiple sources and supply routes. So, as I mentioned, the terminal in Świnoujście, the terminal, floating terminal in Gdańsk, and the Baltic pipe. And the belief is that we can provide diversified supplies to countries that are landlocked, which means Czechia and Slovakia and maybe Hungary in the future. And it is not a new plan, but it gained a momentum after the crisis and during the crisis, because historically the problem was that the countries that could import gas through our routes of supply preferred to buy cheaper gas from Russia. But obviously, the crisis changed the approach to Russian gas. So probably a new window of opportunity opened, and that's at least what our government hopes for. And we'll see, obviously, what comes out of it in reality. But maybe this idea will come to life. And I will ask you, Zuzana, how about Slovakia? Because we have the interconnectors with Slovakia and also with Czech Republic, but this interconnectors has been until now unused because of the situation that I mentioned, that the countries preferred to import cheaper gas from Russia, but this changed. So how does it look from First Slovak's perspective, and how do you assess the regional cooperation during the crisis and after the crisis?
I mean, obviously, it was being developed already before, of course, but after 2022, it became absolutely essential, and I think all actors involved realized that, and especially this Polish-Slovakia interconnector, which was made operational in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, 2022, 2023, yes.
Right. So it has indeed become one of our backbones of, reaching for different routes, especially LNG from the Baltic terminal. It's definitely was hugely, hugely important. Well, because the reverse flows of the interconnector. That's what was being done, and it's crucial, obviously. And connected to this also the connection from Slovakia to the south. The South Stream is important to Slovakia, and very much the cooperation with the Czech Republic, because it's with Czechia we have the more viable energy connection that we have, because it of course dates back to Czechoslovakia. The grids were already there, and now they are being very intensively used, because of course the flow reversed. It's no longer from Slovakia to Czechia, and now it's becoming reverse flow from Czech Republic to Slovakia.
Yeah. And how's that Czech perspective on the regional cooperation?
Yeah, I will just a little bit elaborate more what Zuzana said about this Czech and Slovak cooperation, because it was very interesting that when we heard discussions about Russian gas or oil phase out, Slovakia was saying that they can't support more sanctions against Russia, for example, because they are not ready to be without Russian fossil fuels. And at that time, Czechia came and said that we will help actually, and that Slovakia can feel safe because they can have enough fossil fuels from the Czech Republic. And at that time, during the rule of the previous Czech government, which had really complicated ties with Slovak government, they refused, or we didn't hear much positive response from our Slovak colleagues when it comes to this Czech offer. But as Zuzana mentioned, now it's a bit changing.
I just wanted to add that the reason why it wasn't very welcome, this Czech offer, is of course political. That because it countered the political narrative that it's basically a stupid thing to cut off Russian gas, you know. But of course, behind the scenes, it's an inevitable.
Yes, yes, great point. Like what you said, that but you already explained it very well, that these like political disputes were kind of like breach of these like rational solutions, or finding reasonable solutions of this of this crisis. So let's see what will happen this year, because now it seems that Czech government and Slovak government will cooperate a bit more, not only when it comes to energy flows and interconnectors, but also when it comes to pushing for some reforms at the EU agenda. Because, for example, common fight against the high energy prices and against European emission allowances were also mentioned by Andrej Babiš and Robert Fico, by Czech and Slovak prime ministers, that they would like to change, or they would like to, or at least what Prague wants to do is to have some price caps on emission allowances prices applied at the EU level, and they see Slovakia as kind of like natural partner who could help Czechia to push these reforms at the EU level. So let's see if this initiative will be successful. Czech Republic wants to raise this issue in February, because in February there is this like competitiveness informal European Council summit, and Czechia wants to present some initiatives how to cut energy prices, and I guess that they could present it with Slovakia as some kind of joint project. So I think we will see more cooperation on this level in this year.
Very interesting. Definitely interesting time ahead of us. And as we are running out of time, so maybe it's time for closing reflections. I will say a few words about Poland, maybe first, because when it comes to Poland and the challenges that we'll face in the future, they mostly stay the same, because it's what to do with coal and coal fire power plants. Because now we spend around 9 billion zlotys a year, so it is more or less 2 billion euros to subsidize the sector. And obviously, the government is sweeping this problem under the rug again and again and again. And the thing is that the coal problem is what you mentioned earlier, Aneta, not only coal itself and coal power, but the people that are working in the sector and the miners. So obviously, it is very socially sensitive issue that no government has been able to solve for years, because simply they fear the consequences. And however, now in the National Energy and Climate Plan, they assumed that they will move away from coal. So it is stated in the plan. So I hope that they will have enough political courage to do this. And I think that this will be one of the biggest challenges for the coming years for Poland. And how about Czechia?
I think that for Czechia, definitely energy prices will be still a topic in next years, not only when it comes to households, but also industry. Oh, we have very, our industry is really heavy reliant on energy supplies, energy intensive, so they will face a huge pressure because of these high energy prices. So we can expect really high tensions between, let's say, supporting this type of energy intensive industries. Also, we still, and with the new Czech government, we still face a discussion about the decarbonization. the current government is saying that, the climate crisis is over and the decarbonization is no longer needed. So it will be also pretty tense discussion about, emissions allowances. The new Czech government really wants to fight against them, make the prices lower. For sure, the mentioned coal phase out will be a topic, and the future of the nuclear tender. The current state of play is that we are waiting for a notification from the European Commission, because Czech Republic wants to massively aid this new nuclear construction project. But for this, we need a green light from the European Commission that we can, subsidize a project. So we are waiting for the decision of the European Commission, and at the same time, the construction is already in kind of like preparatory phase, and the project should be completed in 2036. So it will be interesting to see if the Korean constructor we chose as the Czech Republic will manage to meet this deadline, or if there will be any problems regarding this nuclear tender.
And Zuzana, some closing reflections from the Slovak perspective?
Building on what Aneta said, the new nuclear power plant unit that is being planned with the Americans will be, of course, a huge issue here as well, because it's also the biggest public investment plant ever. So it seems that the current government is very eager to actually finalize the actual contract with them. We'll see whether they will have the chance still to do that, because there are elections in 2027. We'll see about that. So yeah, that's on the nuclear front. On the renewables front, I think Slovakia really has some unused potential in that regard. Of course, the geography gives limits of certain kind, but there definitely is potential for more wind and more solar than it is now, and there is this very unreasonable political pushback from the top places currently. So it has its, of course, its effect on investors, and there will be delays in any major projects in development if they ever materialize, really. So that's that. I can only subscribe to what Aneta said when it comes. And also, maybe worth mentioning is that there is a big pushback from Slovakia, and I would say also from Czech Republic. You mentioned it a little bit, to ETS two, the second phase. So there's that, and again, it will probably be a missed opportunities, because instead of thinking about and implementing the compensation mechanism, developing it to a state where it could be really helpful and really working, we invest this energy to a political pushback of something that I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, so very interesting times ahead of us, that's for sure. And thank you all very much for this engaging discussion. And the next episode of our podcast will be focused on the fight against disinformation. And today with me were Aneta Zachoba from Euractiv Czechia, Zuzana Gabricova from Euractiv Slovakia, and me. My name is Olga Jurkowska from Euractiv Poland. And please, if you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe or follow our podcast. Thank you very much for listening us, and join us next time.